The journey of caring for a loved one who is living with dementia can be quite challenging. The aim of this podcast is to make caregiving less daunting and more fulfilling. On this platform, we share knowledge, understanding, and experiences. We enlighten, give hope, and encourage, and in the process, create positive awareness about different aspects of dementia. Welcome to my podcast, Dementia Caregivers Corner. My name is Julia Ratladi. Dementia Care, how deep is your love? Welcome to today's episode where we are joined by Allyson, a passionate dementia care advocate, an entrepreneur, and educator whose journey is as inspiring as it is impactful. This phenomenal woman leads Zinnia TV, a tech platform designed to engage individuals with dementia and reduce stress for caregivers. Her journey from personal caregiving to launching an AgeTech company at 60. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? At 60, it has given her the deep insights into the challenges of dementia care and the role of technology in improving quality of life. In this episode, we shall chat about her expertise on compassionate caregiving. We are going to talk about technology solutions for dementia care. We will end our discussion with chatting about the ever-evolving AgeTech space and what it could mean for the future of dementia care. Allyson, we welcome you to Dementia Caregivers Corner Podcast.
It is great to be here. Thank you so much.
Where are we connecting from? I speak with people from across the world. Where are you?
I am located in Seattle, in the state of Washington, so on the west coast of the United States.
Great. Yes, I'm making friends all over the world with dementia awareness. When I watched the introduction of Zinnia TV, you have mentioned that you were a personal caregiver for your husband who lived with dementia. And you also mentioned that you are the co-founder of Zinnia TV as well as the president. I want to know, would you then say your husband having lived with dementia was an inspiration for Zinnia TV? That is number one. And number two, just briefly explain what Zinnia TV is, what Zinnia is.
Yes. Zinnia TV is absolutely inspired by my work with my husband, supporting my husband, because it is a tool that I wished I had had when I was caring for him. And so first I'll tell you a little bit about what Zinnia is, and then I'll talk about the evolution. Yes. So Zinnia TV is an app that streams video content that has been specifically designed to be digestible by and engaging for people who are living with dementia. So we're talking about people who maybe cannot necessarily track a plot or tell fact from fiction or process rapidly moving audio and video. I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago at a conference where I delivered a talk called Low Tech and No Tech Solutions for People Living with Dementia. And the panelists were all people living with dementia. And I asked the question, what do you like to watch on TV now that you have dementia? And all of them but one said, I can't watch TV anymore because I can't keep track of the characters. It's too fast. I can't take the audio and the video at the same time. So that's what we're talking about. Some people will, out of the gate, think of Zinnia as like Netflix for people with dementia. But it's really a tool where the TV is simply the conduit, the way that we deliver the tool, which are the videos. So let me explain how it evolved. And that sort of explains how the tool works. When my husband was living with dementia and he had moved into long-term care and I visited him, it was very difficult to have conversations because he could no longer speak. And so for anybody who's ever been in that position, you can imagine that as you're trying to talk about things and the other person is unable to respond, you run out of things to talk about. You just sort of have transactional conversations, one-sided about the day. Well, today I did this and tomorrow I'm going to do that. And here's what's going on with Aunt Mary or whatever. And so what I would do is I would bring magazines and pictures to inspire conversation. We couldn't just watch a TV show together and talk about that, which is something that would have happened when he was a healthy person because he couldn't pay attention to TV, right? But I wanted visual stimulation. And so it occurred to me like, oh, okay, well, I've got my iPhone with me or my iPad, and that's got lots of images. So I would use that. Eventually, I started using my Apple devices to create little videos, which is built in, right? It's baked into Apple that they have their Memories product where you can stitch together images to create a little video. It was basically just images set to music. It was slow. It was easy for us to look at and we could talk about them. That's a data point. Okay. So I'm going to share that with you first, that I used these little videos to be a catalyst for conversation. Another data point is that it about drove me nuts that I would show up and find my husband parked in front of a television watching programming that was completely inaccessible to him and programming that he would never, ever have been interested in as a healthy person. Whether it was like old movies, right? Black and white movies, or it might be the news, for instance, or the weather, or Filipino soap operas, because his caregivers were Filipina ladies. And so I thought, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better solution. So taking these two data points, I started doing some research and I discovered a paper which was called Television Viewing for People Living with Dementia in Long-Term Care. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I'm talking about. Like what? And so anyway, with the paper, the lead publisher was a doctor by the name of Kate DiMedeiros. And she talked about the fact that they had done this research where they showed people living with dementia a bunch of different TV programming, and they watched how they responded. They watched I Love Lucy. They watched Bob Ross do his painting show. They watched a show that can be quite provocative, the Jerry Springer show, where there are interviews and people get combative, right? But of all of the viewing, the thing that was most digestible by the people living with dementia was a show called Venice, which was simply images of Venice set to music. And I thought, well, gosh, that's what I'm doing on my phone. So that caused me, my background is in technology. I had friends who worked at Apple. So I called up and I said, I need to talk to somebody who had something to do with this Memories product that I'm using because it's working great. But I can't make little videos of, say, mountain biking or skiing or other things that would have been interesting to my husband because I don't have that content on my phone. So how can I get more content so I can make more interesting videos for him to watch? And also, how can I maybe share them? Like, how can I put them on the TV so that other residents could watch them? Or maybe share them with friends in my support group who are supporting loved ones with dementia. And so my friends at Apple put me in touch with a guy by the name of Frank Lee, who it turns out was on the design team for that product that I was using on my iPad and my iPhone. And I explained to him what I was trying to do. And he had this aha moment where he said, wow, what an interesting use case for this product. We never thought about that. And he said, I think we could do something with this. And he had recently left Apple. And so we started exploring this idea of, could we create something where we are actually generating programming that is accessible to people living with dementia? So that's how it all got started.
Yes, you've said quite a lot there. And I was taken back to the conversation that I had with Dallas. Dallas is in the US as well. He lives with dementia. His bone of contention was he wanted people to learn the language of speaking with people living with dementia because he felt that they are too fast. Because he's talking about people, me and you talking, and we are too fast for him. But then you have taken that, and I don't know the right word to use, but translate it into the technology part of it. That's what I'm getting from you. I guess we'll talk more going forward. So, Allyson, you and I know that older adults experience technophobia. We are aware of that. I think that's why I shouted when I said you started your organization at 60. We know how they are afraid of technology. How do you integrate technology into elder care in a way that is accessible, is friendly, and supportive to both the people living with dementia and their caregivers?
Yeah, I attended an event last week where there was a panel talking about user experiences for people who are older, right? And so that's a challenge that we have because oftentimes the caregiver might be a man in his 80s who is showing Zinnia to his wife who's in her 70s, for instance. So you've got two people who are older, one of whom has dementia. How do you make technology that's accessible for them? The short answer is that you need to meet people where they are. What are they capable of doing? And when we first built Zinnia, it was intended to be something that was on a browser, right? That would be played from a computer. And in fact, our earliest videos were available only as a website. And we had them available for free. We had them available all during COVID for free so that we could just get feedback on the content. We could talk more about research if that fits into today's conversation, because we were also doing research at that time. What we recognized is that it had to be as easy as turning on the television. Making somebody go to a browser and find it and figure it out was not the way to do it. It had to be as easy as turning on a television. And so that's where we realized, okay, well, then we need to turn it into an app that can be watched on TV. And so just like you would go to Netflix or Hulu or Prime or NHK, or whatever the app is that you're using on your TV, that is the way that Zinnia needs to operate. And because our roots are in Apple design, Apple is all about simplicity. And so our designer, Frank, that is the way that he views the world, is how do I make this so easy that anyone can do it? And so that's kind of what our model is. And also we recognize that especially if people are using Zinnia in long-term care, it needs to fit into the workflow. What are the staff currently doing? They're turning on the TV. Okay, then it needs to be as easy as turning on the TV.
The way you say it sounds so simple, like straightforward. I like that because we don't want to cause confusion for our people living with dementia.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also I will say that our product is not intended to be operated by the person with dementia. So the person who is putting on the programming is the care partner. Now, we do have people who are early in their dementia process who use Zinnia TV. They select their own programming and it helps soothe them. So that's great. But the intended audience for us is the caregiver.
Okay. I know you mentioned that you have a background in tech. What challenges or opportunities have you experienced ever since you have started Zinnia TV?
So I think the opportunity is to have it be available to people everywhere, right? I mean, we want both people, family caregivers who are living at home, as well as people who are living in long-term care to have access to Zinnia. And then we also license our content to others who distribute the videos through whatever their channels are. And I would say that the greatest challenge is getting the word out, having people know about it. So what we know is that close to 80% of the time when people go to our website and they sign up for a free trial, because it's a 14-day free trial, about 78% of the time they then subscribe. So the question is, but how do they get to our website? And they can't get there unless they know about it. So that's our greatest issue, is simply getting the word out about the product.
You mentioned something earlier, talking about the care partner or caregiver, as we call them here in the UK, that they were Philippines. So I come from Botswana. Botswana is in Africa. I'm based here in the UK currently. And I think my grandma might have died of dementia, but we didn't know because we don't have the infrastructure to diagnose dementia. It's only later on when I started interacting with people living with dementia, that's when I got to pick up the symptoms that she exhibited, and I'm like, oh, okay, this might have been dementia. So you have caregivers from Philippines, like you mentioned. My grandma is from Botswana. So if she were to move to America and she's diagnosed with dementia, are the services that you provide, can they cater for an immigrant, somebody who is not an American, whose lifestyle or culture is different?
That is such a great question. So we very intentionally created our content without dialogue, very minimal dialogue, so that it is a visual experience. The auditory experience is through music and through sound effects. So the birds video, for instance, you hear lots of birds. The sewing video, you hear scissors chopping fabric, and you hear a sewing machine, the whir of a sewing machine, right? But you don't hear somebody saying, and now I'm going to sew a shirt. So the first thing I do is, right? So the intention is that it can be accessible to people wherever they are. That said, let me share with you that one of the categories of videos that we have, for instance, is our activity of daily living videos. And these are videos that are meant to model the thing that we're about to do or the thing that we should maybe be doing right now. So there are videos like, let's take a shower, let's use the toilet, let's get dressed. And it's not that it's a step by step, like first take the shirt out of the drawer, then put your arm in the sleeve, right? No, 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 no. It's just beautiful imagery of people choosing their clothes, putting their clothes on, standing in front of a mirror, so that we just, for a person who's living with dementia, I might show them that video before we start to get dressed so they know what's coming, right? So, for instance, one of the videos that we have is called Let's Drink Water, because I could say to my mom, hey, mom, it's time for you to drink some water. And my mom might say, oh, thank you. I agree. This is a great time for me to drink. Or she might say, I'm 92 years old. I don't need you to tell me when I need to drink water. So instead, what I might do is just say, hey, mom, let's watch a video. And I put on the video that shows babies drinking water and dogs drinking water and kitty cats drinking water and people clinking their glasses. And then I might offer her a glass of water and she's more receptive because everybody's drinking water. Let's drink some water. So when we conducted 2 years of research at the University of British Columbia in conjunction with Vancouver General Hospital, and they were testing with people who are living in the hospital or who were doing hospital stays and people who lived in long-term care. One of the long-term care communities that they were showing our videos to was primarily people from China. And what they found is that when people clink glasses and they've got ice cubes in them, these folks don't drink ice water. Like that's not the way that they consume liquids, right? And so what we did instead is we had a woman who was Chinese, an older lady, had a cup of tea. And so we filmed her drinking the cup of tea. And in Cantonese, she says, drinking water is so good for my health. Please drink with me. And what they found is that the people in the care community were far more receptive and far more likely to drink at an invitation coming from somebody who speaks their language and who looks like them. So I can say that we've done our best shot across the board at having videos that are accessible to people from any culture. But what we would love to do is create more videos that do very specifically invite other cultures. And that's a matter of content development and, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your question. And yes, I think there are things your grandmother would love, and there may be things that she'd be like, I don't know about that.
Yes. Like, what are you talking about? On another episode that passed, I was talking to Barry. Barry is in Namibia and he lives with Alzheimer's disease. That's what, and he's got a care farm as well. So she said to me, Gina, the things that you do there in the UK, the activities that you do is different from what we do here back home in Namibia or in Africa. That is why I wanted you to clarify that. And I'm happy that you did. Yes. Let's go into compassionate giving. You swear by compassionate giving in dementia care. We know that it plays a very crucial role when you are caring for someone who is living with dementia. So what specific compassionate strategies do you have in your company that right now is assisting people living with dementia and their caregivers? And why do you think compassionate care is important?
The number one thing that I think of with compassion is empathy, right? To be able to try and experience what is it like to be the person who is having that experience? What does it feel like to be that person? So once a month, aside from our videos, right? My background, as you know, is as a family caregiver, which led to my becoming an educator and eventually working at the university here in Washington State, the University of Washington, again, doing education, but for doctors, right? To help them understand how do you be a better provider for people who are living with dementia. And whether it's a doctor, whether it's a family caregiver, whether it's somebody who's being paid to be a caregiver, at the end of the day, I think the way that we are compassionate is by understanding, doing our best to understand that the person we're supporting is doing the best they can. So one of the things that we do at Zinnia, in addition to producing our videos, is once a month we hold a support group for anybody who subscribes to Zinnia. Come on in, and we will meet in a Zoom room, and I do a very brief little lecture about some aspect of how to be a compassionate caregiver, and then we talk. What are your questions? What are the things that you wish you knew more about? And so, for instance, one of our recent conversations was about when somebody is asking repetitive questions, what do you do about it? And as with so many different topics, the way that I approach that is to say, well, let's stop and think about what does it feel like? So imagine that you just told me a story, and then I looked at you and I said, oh my gosh, that's the 15th time you've told me that story. Stop telling me that story. And I say to them, so imagine that in your mind, it is the first time you've told that story. So what does that feel like to you? And I asked the group, like, what would you feel like? And they say, well, I might feel shame, right? I might be embarrassed, but I also might be terrified, because what does that mean? If I don't remember having told you that story, what does that mean? And I might also feel like maybe you're lying to me, because if I had told a story 15 times, I would know it. There's nothing wrong with my brain. And so, where compassion comes in is trying to understand all of those different emotions that a person might be feeling in response to the situation based on their brain changes. And so, how do I then respond? And obviously, the way that I would respond then is not to say, oh, for crying out loud, that's the 10th time you've told me that story, right? It would be to recognize that you don't know that you've told me the story a bunch of times. So now how do I respond in a way that is not meant to provoke you, to make you scared, to make you upset?
I'm thinking of this lady that I cared for. The husband died 5 years ago, and this lady died last year in November. She would ask about the husband, and they would tell her like, no, dad like or died or something, and she would break down as if it's the first time of her hearing the story.
Exactly, exactly. So that's not a very compassionate way to handle it. He's dead, right? No, not compassionate. But there are so many interesting ways to handle that. One way, and in fact, it's so interesting that I mentioned that I'm going to be having a conversation soon. And the conversation I'm having is with the daughter of the woman who created validation theory. And validation theory is a compassionate way of connecting with a person whose truth is not necessarily correct, right? So I believe that my husband is alive, but my husband is actually dead. And so the way that validation theory would have me say, ooh, I wonder what it is that you love so much about him. Let's talk more about your husband. He's the luckiest guy in the world because he married you, right? So I stay in your reality, which is that you love him. He loves you. You have an amazing memories of him, amazing relationship with him, right? So that's one way that I deal with it. Interestingly, a woman I was just chatting with said that she has pictures of all of her family members hanging on her mother's wall with their birth date, and if they're dead, with the date that they died. And so she said that she feels that it's important for her mother to recognize that that this is when they were born, that they've passed away, and to see it every day. Now, she said that that works in her case. Okay. I've also heard people talk about having a conversation So when somebody says, where's my husband? When is he coming home? And the husband has actually passed away, to say, when is the last time you remember being with your husband? And she talks about, this was in a book I read, and she talked about the conversation that followed is that the person said, oh, he was sick. Okay, tell me more about that. He was in the hospital the last time I saw him. And eventually what the person said was, I think he died. Right? So there's all these different ways that we can deal with it that are far more compassionate than just saying, Grandma, he's dead. Because as you said, it causes the person to go through a grief cycle all over again. Why would we do that to someone?
I guess anyone who's going to listen to this podcast, they will come up with so many strategies out of this little conversation that we are having. Let me take you back to Zinnia's services. You and I know that there are different stages of dementia. We've got the beginning, the middle, and the end. Are your services, do they cater for different stages of dementia, or it's just one size fits all?
They absolutely do. So the three main use cases, right? The three main reasons why people use Zinnia. One is, or this is what has been born out of research, right? That one of the reasons is because it can help reduce and soothe agitation. So if somebody's starting to get upset and frustrated and I need to sort of distract them or make them feel better, I can instantly put on a video that they're able to actually focus on and pay attention to. So for instance, I met a woman at a conference who said, oh my gosh, we've got this woman who used to be a pediatric nurse. She took care of babies, and she was getting to a point where every day she would start to get very upset, and we would give her medication. And the medication would cause her to just zone out, right? The medication was meant to just sort of dull her. And she said, but that was terrible because we could see that it was causing her to decline. And also then she might fall down because she's all wobbly, right? And she said, so what we thought is, knowing her background, let's show her the baby's video before we give her the medication and see if just looking at babies is enough to calm her down. And she said it completely changed the game. So we worked with her doctor, and now her care plan is that the first thing we do is we show her a video that will pull her in, make her happy, bring her joy. And most of the time, we no longer need the medication. So that would be useful for somebody at all different stages, right, who is starting to get amped up about things. Another reason why people use Zinnia is for these activities of daily living, which I talked about already. And those are more useful for like mid to late stage dementia. But even in earlier stages, I can sit down and watch a video about drinking water with my mother, who is perfectly capable of going and getting her own glass of water. But at least it gives her the idea that that might be something that we can do. So it's useful across the whole spectrum. The other thing is that we help people communicate and connect. And I want to share this really brief little story. We have a category that are called quizzes, and they're very slow paced, gentle quizzes where there's an image and questions. And recently somebody shared this story with me where she was working with a gentleman who is in a wheelchair, nonverbal, and she decided, because he has a background as a writer, to show him a quiz about literature. And she said her expectations are very low, right? But she's showing him the quiz about literature. And for the first question, he shouts out the answer. And she's like, what? And she said, Allyson, he shouted we thought he was nonverbal. He hasn't spoken in years. Shouts out the answer to every one of those questions. And she said, you could see in him, here he is, he's this bent over guy in a wheelchair. He straightens up. He feels so good about himself. And she said, but the most beautiful thing is that the staff were dancing around. And she said, I've been working with this man for a year and a half. And she said, and I believe it was the first time that the staff saw him, right? That the staff recognized that there is something there. And so one of the beautiful things about this kind of visual stimulation through Zinnia is that it's a key to unlocking. It's a way in, right? It gives us the ability to connect with a person because they're able to see it. They're able to pay attention. So that's what I love.
My mind is taken back to my grandma again. I mean, she was a farmer. On top of everything that we have mentioned, I wonder what else it can be, what other visuals you can provide for a farmer in Africa. Because I think
Yeah,
you need that market, if I were to put it that way. I've read so much about us not having dementia awareness. Myself, I didn't know what dementia was until I came into the UK. And that's when I did my master's. I'm graduating in July in
I'm so
dementia.
proud of you.
And I've
Yay.
started this, yeah, thank you. And I've started this podcast really to create awareness about dementia. So I'm going to give you an assignment again. Please create content for this African woman, this African man, yes, who was a farmer, who's always with the grandchildren. Is it like I'm sure there's something in there. It's just that I haven't gone
Yes.
through all of your videos. But yeah, my mind went to my grandma. Where do you see technology in the future, 5 to 10 years from now, when you're talking of technology and dementia care?
I think that there's no doubt that we have a shortage of people who are available to care for those who are getting dementia, right? There's like no kidding. And here in the United States, where we also have, not to get political, but where we have immigration policies that are, in my opinion, horrible, where the very people who we should be allowing, who we should be welcoming, we should be finding ways to bring in more people who are available to, for instance, work in personal care, but instead we're shunning those people. Ugh. So I think that we need more technology that allows people with dementia to be well cared for. And so what I see happening and what I think we will see more of is, for instance, monitoring systems that help caregivers know when somebody needs assistance because they can't have eyes on all the time. They can't see everybody all at one time. When my husband was in long-term care, he was in a community where there was one caregiver for 14 people with dementia. So imagine, and 5 of them need assistance eating, right? How do you do that? So we have videos that help people eat by themselves, for instance. It coaches them while they're eating. Maybe that'll help. But I look at robotics. Some people think that this sounds horrific, but I think that if there was
Mm-hmm.
a little robot that rolled up to a person and said, like, "Hi, Bob. What a great day to watch some baseball." Like, if there was a little robot that rolls up to a person and it knows who that person is and it knows their history, it could have a conversation with them, right? And so there's the people who would say, yeah, but that's a robot, and people with dementia, like, they wouldn't respond to
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't know. In this talk that I did that was about low tech and no tech solutions, one of the things that we talked about was animatronic animals. You know, somebody who's got a cat that's not a real cat. Well, the people with dementia who were on this panel were like, it's okay with me that it's not a real cat. I know it's not a real cat, but yet it soothes me because when I stroke it, it responds. It turns and it looks at me. It purrs. It's got a heartbeat. So I know it's not a real cat, but yet it soothes me as though it were a real cat. And so I think we need to lean more. I think we are going to have to lean more into solutions that have to do with robotics, that have to do with artificial intelligence, that allow us to create, I don't know, almost an illusion of care, but that actually is as effective as real care. Because it is real care, right? But it's not being delivered by a human.
Yeah. So in other words, we're not running away from that. It's a future that is coming, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it has to.
yes, because dementia caregivers, Allyson, they go through a lot. There's so many articles that have been produced to show that they experience more burnout compared to
Oh, yeah.
caregivers of other illnesses. Because it's not easy to care for someone living with dementia. You and I
No,
know.
no.
I know.
No, it's not. You know that. I know that. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
One of the
Yes.
statistics that we're so proud of is that when we do surveys with with the caregivers who use Zinnia with their loved ones with dementia, 80% of them say that it reduces their own stress because I know that I have something that's going to help me when they start to get agitated. I have something that's going to keep them occupied so that I can get a little bit of work done, right? If my husband really loves fishing and I'm showing him the fishing video or African safari, right?
I saw that as well. Yes.
Yeah, right. Or undersea creatures or whatever it is. It's moving at a pace that he can absorb and he's enjoying it. I can go get some vegetables chopped up for dinner, right? So we need to have solutions that help the caregivers reduce their stress as well.
Right. No, just lovely talking to you. I don't know whether there's any other thing that you would like to add on that I did not ask of you that you think will benefit people around the world.
Well, I mean, I want them to know that, right, that Zinnia TV is like the flower. I'm wearing them on my shirt today, Zinnia flowers. Yes. And the reason that we are named after a flower, the zinnia, is because I'm a mad gardener. That's one of my favorite activities is to be out working in my garden. And zinnias, what I love about them is that they are beautiful and they withstand terrible conditions. So even when things are awful, they still thrive. And that's kind of what our thesis is helping people thrive, even though they are living with a disease that is incredibly challenging.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you. It warms my heart. Every time I talk about dementia, it's like I've known it forever. So any opportunity that I can have to spread awareness, I jump on it because the world needs to know that it's hard to be a dementia caregiver. It's hard to live with dementia, but there are people who are developing some programs, some activities. Now we're talking about tech that can assist to lessen the burden.
Yeah. And I think that absolutely, at least here in the United States, there has been this sort of shift in the way that we look at dementia, where instead of people talking about how people are dying from dementia, we talk about how people are living with dementia. How do you live well despite the fact that you have dementia? And I think that that's what solutions like Zinnia and other technologies are all about. And education. I think that, we started off talking about compassion. How do you be a compassionate caregiver? Compassionate to the person that you care for and compassionate for yourself. And the way to do that is education. By understanding dementia, understanding how to communicate with a person with dementia can absolutely be a game changer. And support, getting support for yourself by joining a support group. And there are also support groups for the person living with dementia. And I think that that's what's crucial. And also the last thing I'll say is busting the stigma. People need to be able to say, you know what? I have dementia and look at me. I'm still doing stuff, right? I'm getting on with my life instead of people being embarrassed to say they have dementia. Nobody should be embarrassed because they have dementia. They should be shouting from the rooftops, look at me. I'm still living and I'm still viable and I'm still doing things. And that's, I think, what our whole society, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in the UK, whether in the United States, we need to be compassionate towards people who are living with diseases of all kinds or disabilities of all kinds. I'll get off my soapbox. Okay. Thank you. I'm so grateful to you. Please let me know. Email me when you have graduated. I want to be able to celebrate with you.
I will. Yes. Let me take this time and thank you, our dear listeners, for tuning into this episode. If you have enjoyed our conversation or are passionate about dementia care, please consider leaving a review and sharing this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps us reach more and more people and raise awareness about dementia-related issues. Until next time, thank you for your time. Ta-da! Dementia care. How deep is your love?